Hi everyone, I'm Aditi from ISWA. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on exploring climate benefits through circular economy and integrated waste management. We will begin the hour-long webinar with presentations by our speakers, followed by a short question and answer session. So we encourage you to type your questions in the questions window to your right. The speakers will choose some of these for the discussions at the end. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to thank our main sponsors, Veolia, Ecomondo, EFAT, and the City of Rotterdam, as well as the Platinum members of ISWA who support our work and make it possible for us to do what we do. ISWA counts on the support of our members, so if you're not yet a member, please do visit our membership page by visiting the link on the screen. You could also write to our membership manager, Mr. Daniel Purchase. You can see his email on the screen to find out more about the several membership options we have available with discounts for students, low-income countries, online members, and so on. So just briefly about ISWA before we move on with the webinar, maybe some of you don't know us yet. The International Solid Waste Association is a global, independent, and non-profit association. We are open to individuals and organizations from the scientific community, public institutions, public and private companies from all around the world working in the field of waste and resource management. Our mission is to promote and develop sustainable and professional waste management worldwide, while also promoting a transition to a circular economy. So I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers for today. Our first speaker is Dr. Johannes Paul. Dr. Paul currently works at the Department of Climate, Environment and Infrastructure at GIZ in Germany. He's involved in several advisory, research and development projects that relate to circular economy with a focus on waste management, climate mitigation and marine litter, as well as the SDGs and capacity building. He's also the vice chair of the ISWA Working Group on Climate Change and Waste Management. Our second speaker for today is Dr. Patrick Dorvil. Dr. Dorvil has been working as a senior economist in the urban division at the European Investment Bank since 2008. His main duty is to carry out both due diligence work to monitor integrated solid waste projects, as well as circular economy projects, both within and outside the European Union. Thank you both for being with us today and presenting. So Johannes, the floor is now yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleasant good day to all of you and many thanks for joining our webinar. I have the pleasant task to introduce to you our topic, exploring climate benefits. What does circular economy and solid waste management could do? What could we do in it? What I have prepared is looking from the global level, from the Paris Agreement, into relevant facts of circular economy and global situation of solid waste, and of course some relevant facts which relate to our measuring our climate carbon footprint, and then going in the end also to relevant developments here in Europe. We have the European Green Deal. Yeah, let's start with the Paris Agreement. The year 2015 brought, I think, something very relevant and important for all of us on the international scale. It was not only the United Nations who agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals to guide us to 2030. No, in the Paris Agreement, in the COP23, the nations agreed to come up with a new mechanism, which is very laudable and hopefully helps us to switch to a more efficient joint combating climate change. The Paris Agreement says in the beginning, the undersigning states agreed to combat together to hold the increase of global temperatures well below 2 degrees. That is a very relevant point. And the main tool to do so, the mechanism agreed, was that every country, every nation prepares a national climate plan, also called the National Determined Contributions. So this new plan comprises mitigation and adaptation. That was a big change before. In the mechanism before, developing countries, non-annex countries, did not have to address mitigation as a target. So with that, all nations agree to do effort also in mitigation. And the Paris Agreement also said developed countries should take the lead and support these developments in order to reach the targets. Another mechanism to stay ambitious is that the national climate plans, NDCs, should be updated every 5 years to keep a high ambition level. Let's check on some relevant facts which we have to see in our sector. First of all, according to the World Bank, we are now with around 2 billion tons domestic type waste on the planet. That may increase to more than 3 billion tons in 2050. Unfortunately, from the resources we use on the planet, less than 9% so far could be considered as managed in a circular manner. This is, of course, very relevant for the future, and there are many opportunities in for us. If you look now to what we collect in solid waste management, for example, in the most countries we have more than 50% bio-waste in our municipal waste collection, for example. This material could be prone to a climate relevant if it generates methane, for example, in dump sites. The Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome, they calculated some years back that if we only look along the food chain on a global scale, and we count all the waste along the food chain generated, this would have a potential of generating greenhouse gases, methane, in a magnitude of a large country like US or China. So the food chain, food waste is a relevant aspect for our considerations. On the other hand, resource recovery, just as giving an example here for metals, if you would be able on a global scale to collect all iron scrap and aluminum scrap, we could almost reduce all the greenhouse gas emissions related to metal use more than 50%. Two relevant trends which gather us in the waste management. One is waste generation increases with economic development. So the left graphic shows that on the x-axis, the stage of development from low black to high blue income countries, and on the y-axis, the waste generation per capita per year. So you see, you go to higher developed countries in blue, countries like Australia, Japan, Germany, US, and the waste generation increases. So this trend is not decoupled yet. Economic growth means more waste generation. If you think about the composition, quality of what we collect as waste, then the right graphic gives us a trend. To the right side, LIC stands for low-income countries. So you see majority is green waste, bio-waste, relatively from what we collect. But if you go to the left side to high-income countries, you see relatively bio-waste decreases. But instead, we collect more than 50% paper, packages, cartoons, plastics, metals, and glass. Again, another indicator of economic development and wealth. Looking into resources, first into the energy, what are the global trends? Unfortunately, to the left side, you see we still depend to more than 90% on fossil fuels for our energy supply, gas, oil, and coal. Whereas renewables, here mentioned as traditional biomass, or wind, solar, hydrothermal, water energy, has only 10%. So that has to change in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Another curve which I show here, the plastic production shows the same trend. Plastic is also a byproduct of oil, crude oil, as a base. So it is also a fossil material, if you want to say so. And with every ton, if it is plastic, gas, oil, or coal, we add carbon into our atmosphere related to carbon emissions by producing energy or products. If you look now in the sectors who are counted by the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, in their official reports, the sectors, how much greenhouse gases do they generate from our activities, the so-called anthropogenic greenhouse gases, then you'd see at the left side in the pie diagram several sectors. The main come from energy systems, energy for transportation and for buildings make more than 55%. You see that in the middle pie diagram summarized. Whereas activities we perform to produce whatever we need, summarize 45% from industry, but also from the so-called affordable sector, agriculture, forest, land use. So circular economy has now for us the challenge. It is a cross-cutting issue. If you do something for example, recovering materials, you may substitute energy or materials. So it is not one sector itself. It is a cross-cutting issue, but IPCC counts greenhouse gases along the sectors. This is a problem we have to discuss also later on. If you look into the locations, where are the greenhouse gases on the planet generated? Let's focus. These are the cities. More than 70% of greenhouse gases are emitted by cities. So this is the main battleground to reduce emissions. And you also see here 30% is just for energy of buildings, electricity, heat, and activity in buildings. So this is also a big sector to act on. I added here the resources used for global societal needs, also to guide us. There are 4 lines marked in red. 55% of the resources we need go for housing and infrastructure, 23% for nutrition, 30% for mobility, 10% for consumer goods. So this may also be an indicator where do we have to act most to improve our system. From linear economy to circular economy, that is something discussed now in so many events. Basically, in our business as usual systems or business models, many follow the linear supply chain. This is shown in red here. So the take, make, use approach cannot lead us towards the future. We have to change. But that means also we have to go to life cycle assessment. We have to consider what happens with our products after life. We have maybe also to calculate the next lives. This would then be circular thinking, circular economy. So whatever's in green here, circular economy approaches shows us before anything comes waste, there are many activities, designing a product, choosing a raw material. What material do you choose? Is it a harmful material? Is it a material which can be used in the next cycle? Is a product fit to be repaired? If it is fit to be shared by people, can it be reused without problems? There are so many activities we have to do prior to selling a product, which have to be included in our circular economy approaches, which is much more than waste management. Nevertheless, I would like to show here also the 2 systems we have in waste management. At the right side, the red circle, this is somehow more characterizing what you would find in a developing country. Not much consideration before waste is generated, and after generation, very often it is collected in an unsegregated manner. So waste segregation is not functioning or lacking. Some segregation may take place by the informal sector, but a lot of the waste is also going to disposal site, and unfortunately also a lot of waste is not collected. Very often the collection efficiency is 60, 70, 80% only in the cities. So this may generate a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, especially on the disposal side, through methane generation, but also through burning the so-called black carbon as a short-lived climate pollutant. The blue circle, here I want to show, this is maybe what we have more in a use system. We follow the waste hierarchy shown to the left. So recycling, minimizing, reusing becomes in the focus. So we develop technologies which allow us to bring material back in the cycle or to bring energy back in the cycle, applying modern composting, sorting plants, treating waste, stabilizing waste that cannot generate methane on the landfill, producing biogas and anaerobic biodigesters, co-processing so-called RDFs, refuse-derived fuel. There are many opportunities just in traditional waste management to already improve the carbon footprint and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now a slide where I want to introduce to you what do we have to think about if we want to measure our carbon footprint from circular economy and waste management. First of all, we need somehow to agree on an emission factor for product or for a certain material, if it is a metal, if it is coal. So emission factors establishment is very important. And that depends now on several fields or considerations, which are listed here, the global warming potential. That means we agreed in IPCC that carbon dioxide is measured as a factor 1 with, in their relation to change climate. For methane, we have now the global warming potential 28. So we would have to calculate this factor if you look, for example, in biogas generation or in the disposal site. If we are active in our sector, we should always see that the electricity mix or the energy mix we have will change our emission factor. You can come up with an average per country. Countries have different energy supplies, but you can also look into the location. Just look to the photos I presented here, the small wheel loader. The question if this is now diesel driven or if it is electricity driven will already change the emission factor per ton of treated waste. So this is what you have to consider if you come up with the emission factor. Your system boundaries are very relevant. What area are you talking about? What time lengths? Do you consider 100 years emissions from a disposal site or 50 years? What activities are included? Do you include international transport of balers in containers, for example, in shipping? This all has to be taken into account. If it comes to the word life cycle assessment, then the question is, what do you include in your life cycle? Do you include the reuse of material? Do you include a second cycle? Do you include co-benefits for other sectors? There would be one, as an example, if you produce compost, you also substitute chemical fertilizer. So what is the climate benefit of this? You also bring the compost to soil, you sequester carbon, that also has an impact on climate. And so your emission factor changes if you include these calculations. Difficult with services, if you want to assess services, for example, repairing something or organizing things differently, that maybe become a real challenge. Lastly, the technology aspect is also very relevant. Do you have a low-tech or high-tech system? Do you have a windrow composting? Or do you have, for example, a high-tech in-house reactor, which has much other technology and an emission control? This will make a difference. Yeah, this graph just shows you now that you come up with emissions factors. In red, you see the side where you see per waste management activity or per production, you have a certain factor, a certain emission per ton of product. In yellow, it shows now if you change or you invent a certain recycling technology, for example, or recovery activity, you have another factor, and you can compare those factors, and you may come up with emission saving by providing secondary raw materials or by changing systems. I just pick one example for you, the second lower one, the landfilling here, high-tech landfill, 50% gas utilization, you cannot get so much more. If you have this high-tech landfill, it would still be counted with around 0.7 tons carbon dioxide per ton disposed. This would be the carbon footprint, the climate impact. If you take out from the same amount the organic material and you put it in an anaerobic digester, you become carbon neutral. So that means the methane emissions, which counted in the landfill, are tackled in the anaerobic digester, and you don't have a carbon impact. On the other hand, if you now take the biogas from the anaerobic bioreactor, you can get a greenhouse gas saving in the energy sector, but this is very often not accounted in the waste sector. Another problem which may play a role when you consider how to award climate benefits, for example, how to go for climate finance. Next slide, just to give you a hint, you can find this all on the website of the International Panel for Climate Change, IPCC, the methods, how you can calculate in the waste management sector climate impacts, carbon footprints for waste disposal, for composting, and so on. I don't want to read it, just want to make you aware that this is available. But this logic does not follow circular economy. It just counts one activity in the sector. Now let's go to some very challenging and interesting developments in the European Union. 1 year ago, the European Union released the Green Deal, and that will shape or will be the guidance paper, guidance strategy, roadmap, also for becoming climate neutral. The main objective of the EU Green Deal is to reach climate neutrality in 2050. Similarly, we have that in Japan. China now declared for 2060 climate neutrality. And the question is, how can we go there? What do we have to do? Well, the strategy has the objective to transform the society in the EU region into modern, resource-efficient, carbon-neutral, and competitive economies. And in order to go there, the EU Green Deal has 37 annexes, and there are many guidance papers, like the climate law will be part of it, the circular economy action plan, the industry strategy, the plastic strategy, the methane strategy, and just released 3 weeks ago, hydrogen strategy, just released in July this year. So we would have to look in all of these tools to see what does it mean for us, what do they contribute to go for greenhouse gas reduction, and how does it relate to circular economy. There are many mechanisms which you can read in the EU Green Deal. Carbon pricing is included, which may also trigger a carbon border adjustment for products which are produced with another carbon footprint in other regions. There will be a stronger switch towards renewable energy, which we are already on the way. There will be a strong extension to use and produce hydrogen. E-mobility is on the agenda, and so on. This all should lead to the decarbonization in all sectors. Relevant also for our webinar today is that the European Investment Bank will act as a climate bank, and Dr. Dorvil will later on brief us on that. Yeah, there are so many actions addressed. Just to mention a few, green public procurement is very relevant for circular economy. An electronic passport for products is foreseen to deal much better with products. Consumer rights will be addressed, the right to repair, for example. Product durability and time lengths for use should be extended again. And single-use plastic packaging use should be changed and phased out if possible. And also a renovation wave for buildings is foreseen there. What gives me hope that this Green Deal can be implemented? I made this graphic to show you, yes, we have experienced it in the past. I have witnessed it, that when the EU Waste Management Framework Directive was released, which said we phase out waste disposal and we especially stop to dispose organic waste. At the same time, we had supporting laws for renewable energy use. And starting from the year 2000, within 1 decade, that is what's shown here, we established from around 500 to going to 6,000 facilities of biogas production and waste management and agriculture. As you see here, 2 pictures, an anaerobic bioreactor and then a bioreactor more for wet waste. And you see in the red line that provided electricity capacity switched within 10 years from almost nothing to more than 2 gigawatts. And this trend continued and will also be continued with the Green Deal. This product, gives me another idea also to link to the hydrogen strategy. I call it here anaerobic digester to X. The hydrogen strategy has introduced the word power to X, which means you take power and produce many products, not only one. We have the same already demonstrated in the waste sector. This anaerobic bioreactor switched the value chain from a compost plant. In the beginning, we only produced compost, as you see here. With this new technology, now we produce methane, the first product. Here we transfer to electricity, the second product. The byproduct heat is used to dry the fraction of more organic, of more woody components from the compost, which can then be used to sold to biomass power plants or producing pellets. So the value adding is also very relevant to explore from a circular economy perspective. Yeah, that brings me closer to the new developments. Some words about the hydrogen strategy in the end. I was very inspired by the hydrogen strategy because I found the comment from the great visionary Jules Verne. Jules Verne has foreseen 150 years ago already. He said, "I see a time when water will be the fuel of the future." And now it took us 150 years to go there. Almost everyone knows already the word fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells. What does it mean? It means we now want to switch to producing hydrogen out of renewable energy. That is the main point here. Hydrogen offers a lot. Hydrogen is will help to decarbonize because there's no carbon in it. You take water, you separate it, an electrolyzer using electricity, and you produce hydrogen. And if you do that with renewables, there's no carbon involved. With the hydrogen, now this can go to base metals. It can be used in methanol production and producing renewable fuels like kerosene, biodiesel, but it can also be used for base chemicals like ammonia. And it can be used for transportation. It will act as a storage. Hydrogen will offer an option to store energy. So it was an alternative to the batteries. So we can store it and somehow harvest renewable energy like wind, hydrothermal, water, solar. We store it in hydrogen and bring it later to decarbonize industry and energy system. This is the idea behind. I think it's very exciting. And biomass is part of it because biomass can also be going into methane. There are two words now communicated, the so-called blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is made out of the fossil gas we provide. We may need it for a while. That's why the EU strategy, the hydrogen strategy, foresees also to support carbon capture and sequestration systems, so-called CCS systems. Until we have green hydrogen that is totally produced from renewables, we may have also for a certain time to deal with the blue hydrogen, but then we have to capture the CO2 involved in it. At the moment, when you look at this graph here, this is my last slide for you to show, you see us in 2000, hardly any hydrogen produced, but you see the vision in 2050, there are 5 colors here in the diagram going from buildings, energy supply, industry, the heat building. You see that the sectors will absorb or switch to hydrogen and in that way can be decarbonized. At the moment, we already produce 150 million tons of hydrogen, but this is all blue hydrogen from methane, and the switch has to go to the green hydrogen and to produce so much more. So you see here in 2050, we could have more than 400 million tons hydrogen from renewable sources as green hydrogen. That is the vision of the hydrogen strategy. I would like to stop at this point. We can discuss later on. I added 2 more slides without explaining the methane strategy just released. That is very important for us. Please have a look into it. It's a hydrogen strategy which shows, these documents show you what EU envisions to go to the decarbonization and to reach climate neutrality. But with that, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Patrick Dorvil, to go to the next side, how we finance this all. So please, Patrick, floor is yours.
Right. Many thanks, Dr. Paul. Many thanks also to ISWA colleagues, Aditi, Leonie, for inviting the bank and for organizing these. I will give you a very brief based on what Dr. Paul was mentioning before in terms of targets to be achieved, in terms of objective of the European Union. And also, I will show you or give you some, introduce some initiatives tackling or addressing by the bank together with partner organization. First of all, about EIB itself, this is one of the largest, maybe this is the largest multinational financing institution worldwide. So the bank itself belongs to EU 28 member states. So this is also very important. This is the only self-financing institution. So basically, EIB is raising financial means from the financial market. So the banks is triple A rated. So that means this is very easy or very cheap for EIB to get funded from the financial market and pass the loan to final beneficiaries. And those final beneficiaries can be anything like public sector. It can be also public sector, private, corporate, PPP projects and equity, you name it. And very important also, especially for this discussion, for this conference today, 10% of our business are being implemented in outside Europe. So meaning 90% of our business, we're carrying them out within EU. But nonetheless, in terms of numbers, even this 10%, this is quite substantial. That's the reason why I mentioned that. I said, well, it is something between 6 and 7 billion euro every year in terms of investment. That's very key. First of all, because of the audience, because we are quite international, and then I'll give some examples later on. And secondly, also, what's the main objective of the bank? We consider ourselves as a policy banking. That's very important because policy banking, the main objective is to implement EU directive, EU goals. Like Dr. Paul mentioned, one of the goals is, for instance, EU Green Deal to achieve carbon neutral by 2050. So this is one of the goals. So these goal objective of the EU are being reflected in EIB business strategy and business portfolio. This is how the bank, and this is quite important because if you compare that, what we're doing with other, like for instance, commercial banks, basically driven by profit, and you'll see a huge difference. And as a matter of fact, EIB considers itself as a non-profit banking. In terms of number, I think I mentioned that. I said, well, 90% of our business in EU, within EU and outside the EU, more or less 10%. In fact, we're talking about 6-7 billion euros split in Asia, Northern Africa, Latin America, and etc. etc. But most of those projects, and I will talk about that later on, we call that in our own jargon, this is on mandate. So meaning the European Commission has to give EIB mandate to work outside Europe. That's very important. That's a very key issue, because if there is anything happen in terms of political risk, the European Union will be or will take care of this risk and not on EIB portfolio. So one thing that Dr. Paul mentioned already, this is EIB as a climate bank. So how these will be reflected in the reality? For instance, as of 2021, as in more or less 1.5 month, anything, any project, any operation that EIB will finance supposed to be in line with Paris Agreement as developed by Dr. Paul. So that's very key. And second of all, we are targeting 50% of our project supposed to be dedicated to climate. And we're targeting also 1 trillion of euro as investment between 2020 and 2030. As you see, when we said, well, the bank is considered, we are considering ourselves as a climate bank, and you can see that based on precise concrete project portfolio. So that means more and more whatever we're doing supposed to be in line with climate, supposed to tackle environmental issue. So that means those two topics really fit into the main discussion today's, which are a circular economy in integrated waste management. On circular economy, we developed together with the Commission a guide published also, where we tackle project, of course, on environment, innovation, and support to SMEs. And it can be, or it is obviously cross-cutting. So that means a given project can be highly innovative and it is environment and also SMEs. I can give you 2 concrete examples. Due diligence that I'm doing now for 2 projects in France, mainly on recycling. This is SME. This is highly innovative because we're talking about, upcycling plastic to oil, which is highly innovative, and also obviously this is about environment. So that means by tackling circular economy projects, so you can tick different boxes. Another initiative very important also for us, the bank is not just only providing financial means, but also we are providing technical assistance, which is quite important. So we have advisory services within the bank with our own economist engineer, a hub. So cities are contacting the bank with a given concept, and together with project promoter, we develop and carry out feasibility studies, environmental studies to make it happen. In terms of waste management, mainly within the EU, we've carried out some researches together with the Commission in terms of market size, and also we've identified investment barriers. So that means in terms of administrative procedure, waste tariff, which is another one, and processes. This is another pillar. In terms of processes, I can be precise on that. So anything regarding top level of the hierarchy as developed by Johannes Paul, in terms of reuse, recycling, we're quite confident on that, and there is no real opposition on that. But when it comes to implementing waste facility or treatment facilities to deal with residual waste, like for instance waste to energy plant, incinerator, and this is where we are facing some difficulties within Europe, but obviously outside Europe. But just to be clear, this kind of process is not so very common outside Europe, as pointed out by Johannes, because of the waste composition. You know, if we're talking about 60% of organic waste, obviously this is not the waste fraction that we are targeting in waste to energy plant. So other very important mechanism that we mentioned before, this is for project, mainly for project outside Europe. As I said, to be able to finance between 6 and 7 billion euro every year in countries, Latin America, Africa, Northern Africa, in Asia, etc. So we work together with the European Commission on the so-called blended mechanism. So that means those projects, specifically on environmental sector, this is not just only about providing loan, but also we have support, financial support, technical support from the European Commission, and I'll give you an example on that later on. So that means, for instance, in neighborhood countries, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, for instance, we have the so-called Economic Resilience Initiative, which is a dedicated envelope just only to deal with feasibility study, technical assistance issue. So mainly those program, they are regional based. So that means if you go to Latin America, you will see within the European Commission the so-called LIFE, Latin American Investment Facility. If you go to the Caribbean, you will see Caribbean Investment Facility, etc., etc. Those facilities, I repeat myself, are providing financial means and technical assistance to make it happen. And definitely our sector, circular economy, integrated solid waste management are definitely eligible, and this is where we get a lot of support from the European Commission. Technical assistance, I think I mentioned that as one of the pillars provided by the bank, but not just only technical, but also financial assistance. When it comes to financial, it can be like, for instance, a PPP project, which is very complex. And we have inside the bank, you know, dedicated PPP office to deal with this kind of facilities. Very quick, another clear one on circular economy. So some years ago, together with partners like BGK, like Caisse de Dépôt in France and KfW in Germany, we put together an envelope of 10 billion euro to be invested between 2019 and 2023 in circular economy. So that means, you know, not just only on financial side, but not only on financial, as I said, we have also technical assistance, financial assistance to make that happen. You can see there is substantial envelope dedicated to the sector. Another one, mainly for projects outside the European Union, which is the so-called Clean Ocean Initiative. We put together with KfW, with AFD in France, you know, a dedicated envelope to prepare just only project, you know, to tackle plastic waste going to the ocean, etc., and worth 2 billion investment together with those partners. Again, another clear one to deal with crucial issue, because as you know, plastic in ocean, this is definitely a crucial issue worldwide. A very brand new initiative 2-3 weeks ago, again, together with the World Bank, EIB and World Bank have been identified as partners to implement some 4 trillion investment till 2030 to tackle anything regarding sustainable cities. But obviously, when we talk about sustainable cities, this is, as Dr. Johannes Paul mentioned, you have issue like energy. And remember the slide from Johannes saying, well, between 70 and 80% of greenhouse gases produced worldwide, this is coming from cities. So if we want to be carbon neutral, or if we want to achieve sustainable development goals, we have to start with cities, because on one hand we have cities as economic engine for states, for nation. On the other hand, main producer of carbon greenhouse gases. So if we want to tackle this, we have to put in place mechanism to address energy efficiency, to address renewable energy, as pointed out by Johannes, to address solid waste management, circular economy issues, you name it. So those are eligible, or those components in the last initiative, as I said, the so-called GAP fund, together put in place together with the World Bank. Let me give you a very quick idea about what we're doing precisely. This one that was last year, we put 130 million loan to De Richebourg in France, just for recycling. De Richebourg is recycling metal, plastic, and you name it. And then also this project is very innovative, and this is one of the largest recycling corporate in Europe. And EIB has financed on the next investment program of De Richebourg. Another one that I've carried out the due diligence 2-3 years ago, Ubacer in Spain, dealing with innovative projects, circular economy, electric trucks, and etc. So that means pushing for more circular and less fossil-driven trucks in cities. And by the way, Ubacer came to the bank some months ago, so we are doing the due diligence for the next programming period, financing investment period for Ubacer, which is worth more than 200 million investment. So as you can see, this is huge. Another one outside Europe. So 2017, I started a new project in Jujuy in Argentina, close to Bolivia border. Very interesting project, a concrete example where we blend together with the Commission our investment. So EIB more or less is putting 42 million investment loan, and the Commission give us more or less 11 million euro for free, based on the what I mentioned before, the so-called LIFE, Latin American Investment Facility. So you have to remember those facilities from the Commission, they are based on this is grant money, not investment. So in summary, so we are policy banking, trying to implement EU policy, the non-profit institution, one of the largest financing institution worldwide, but not just only financing, we're providing advisory services to both cities, countries within Europe and outside Europe. And main goal of the bank is to achieve, or to help promoters to achieve sustainable development goals and EU directive like the EU or the EU Green Deal. This is one of the main target for the years coming to the bank. I think in a nutshell, that's all from EIB side. If there is any question and thoughts, happy to discuss. Thank you. Up to you now, Aditi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dorvil and Dr. Paul. We have some questions that have been submitted, and I've sent them over to you in the chat format. Maybe we can begin with Patrick, because there were a few questions for you. You can look at the chat and see.
Sorry. Oh, okay. I was on mute. Some questions for Patrick. Whether EIB extend financial support to Indian firms in India? Definitely. I mean, as I said, we are a worldwide institution operating in both within EU, outside EU, and our financial instruments cover everything, like public. So you go to India, you submitted. If you go to our website, you can easily see what we're doing now, which type of project we are financing in India. As I said, financial financial product can be anything like corporate to firms, private firms whatsoever, public institution, PPP, so out of cash flow, etc. Could be new project on waste to energy financed by EIB, for example, waste to energy. Well, that's a very tricky one, because actually whatever we're doing, it's supposed to be in line with EU directives. And if the bank has published a new energy lending policy, you can see that. So basically, yes, we are financing waste to energy plant because it is in line with EU directive. But these plants supposed to meet certain threshold in terms of emissions. So to be precise, in waste to energy, if you see in the new energy lending policy by the bank, we will say, well, any plant that we are financing supposed to have an emission less than 250 grams CO2 per kilowatt hour produced. So that's a threshold. Why it is like this? Because as I mentioned, it has to be Paris aligned. As of 2021, whatever we're doing is supposed to be Paris aligned. Are EIB bank loans tied to manufactured technology as well? Well, I don't, Joe, I'm not sure whether I understand the question, but you know, EIB, as I said, we have a broad range of you know, sectors that we are financing, but I'm not sure whether your question is precise. Yes, Aditi, up to you.
Thank you very much for answering those. I will move on to Johannes and the questions that arrived right at the beginning. So Johannes, to you, any chance that carbon offsets incentives similar to CDM will be revived again? Because Joe Huang says it's such a waste to abandon such high impact mitigation protocols.
Good question. Yes, I welcome this question. I think there is not the loss of the CDM mechanism. This was voluntarily and given to developing countries as a support in case they make an effort. Now, if you look at the NDCs, that is very fair. Among all countries, you have to prepare your own national action plan per country, including mitigation. Nevertheless, it also says the Paris Agreement that the developing countries take the lead and support. So, for example, give you an example, you have a law, a legal framework in your country which says you have to close all the dump sites and you have to have landfills. Then this would be the business as usual. That is, according to CDM, it is a national law and a business as usual, so it has not the quality of additionality. But now, if under CDM, if you demonstrate and make organic waste treatment, which is not requested by law, for example, anaerobic directors or so, then you could say this is an additional benefit. And this mechanism is now not called CDM, but the NDCs could now also be given to international donors, the Global Environmental Facility. We have the NAMA, several countries joined. We have the ICI. There are so many other mechanisms which on the COP, for example, the COP26 next year in Glasgow, someone called me, it may be a COP of the local action. So down from the Paris Agreement international to the national level, the NDCs, we can go now to local action. And NDCs could be negotiated. I know from Indonesia, they somehow have just calculated 22% is business as usual. That's what they want to do, what they have to do according to their law. But they said we could also do, in addition, another 20%, but we are not able to do it. For that, they would ask for international support. And that can be now what I said. There are so many mechanisms, and you can negotiate and find donors who may support this, because sometimes you can score higher in another country investing with the same investment in your own high industrial countries, you cannot come up. So this is very similar, but then it has to be negotiated. But I see this as a great opportunity. which probably will also be in discussion in Glasgow next year.
Thank you, Johannes.
Questions.
Absolutely. I give one more to you, actually, from Aravindu. He actually asks, what is the best and economical method for disposal of legacy waste, which have accumulated over time in different places, especially when you consider land reclamation for setting up new waste management facilities?
Yeah, I think that's a problem almost every country faces, disposal from the past. The backpack, I would call it backpack. Usually this is something also relevant in climate and should also be brought in the NDC. Give you also an example. On the positive side, reclaiming the waste sites, cleaning up the country with open mining is an option. It costs money, and someone would have to demonstrate that this is also climate relevant and giving a certain gain. If you want to bring it in your NDC as a positive activity to reduce climate gas emissions, that could well be for a large dump site, for example, which still has potential to generate methane 15 years. So this has to be explored in the NDC. Yeah, otherwise I would say look into the climate side from adaptation. Give you an example. If you look in Indonesia or Philippines, you will find many dump sites very close to the sea level. But more than 50% live along the shorelines. Most of the dump sites are, I call it always in former fish ponds. This is very climate relevant because the sea level may rise, and there you have the problem. This is not really in the law. According to the law, it should already have been closed. It should not have happened, but you do not find anyone who is responsible. So it's a socialized problem in the municipalities. This could be part of your climate plan to say, I tackle this in order to avoid marine litter and climate impacts. So both are emissions. And in parallel to what we have as SDG 13, climate concerns, we have SDG 14 with the marine litter. So I think EIB or other development banks will be very open if an NDC also tackles these problems at the same time. This is even would increase efficiency of doing, but it's not foreseen under the climate protocol. I just mention it to say, yes, this is a problem in every country, but it could also be part of the NDC in order to solve it. I hope it answers.
Thank you, Johannes. I'll pivot to Patrick now. Patrick, Mario is asking, how do you support a waste management technology developed in an EU country, to be applied in sustainable agricultural production in developing countries? Do you give support to the company that has developed the technology or to the country that wants to apply it?
Well, for any operation, any project, first of all, you start with the so-called project promoter. So who's the vis-a-vis, who's the counterpart of the bank? So assuming, for instance, a corporate wants to develop something dedicated for developing countries, I presume, first of all, this company which wants to, to develop these, will approach the bank. As I said, in our financial, instrument, we have a broad range of different financial instruments depending on interest. So I would presume, first of all, the company itself which wants to develop that. Another very important point also in this context, EIB also is managing many different so-called mandates on behalf of the European Commission. I can be precise with you. One of them, for instance, is to deal with innovative technology. So that means one of the projects that I mentioned before, a recycling facility in southern France. One of the key issues of this process, it is not has not been running on commercial scale. So that means they have pilot project and they have TRL readiness technology until 6. And then now they come to the bank and said, well, we'd like to finance, plastic to oil, for instance. What we're doing, we use dedicated envelope for innovation, from the European Commission. So that means basically, without going into details, the Commission guarantees a lot of deal that EIB is doing if there is any risk involved, risk in terms of innovation, risk in terms of weak partnership, etc., etc. So just to mention that, so that means this is not a pure standard bank. We're providing loan to good project. Of course, we have to tackle, to address a good project, because remember we said, well, the bank is self-financing, but on the other hand, we have also instrument together with the Commission to tackle risky project.
Thank you, Patrick. Unfortunately, we cannot, we've, I think, finished our time for today's webinar, and we can't go into much more detail. Hopefully, we will have a series of these topics coming up, hopefully next year. And this webinar, as well as every other webinar that has been organized by ISWA, have been recorded, and you can go back to the webinars at any time. These recordings are available on the YouTube channel. So I'd like to say a big thank you to our speakers today, and to all of you for joining this webinar. We have several coming up in the next few weeks, so hopefully you will join us for those as well. And so thank you, goodbye, and see you at another of ISWA's events in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Aditi, many thanks to you. Have a nice afternoon. Thank you.
You too, Patrick. Bye, Johannes. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.